I'll tell you where it's at. We're presently, right now, gold is sitting at 1,624, and it's seen a high today so far of 1,633.80. Never seen that price before yet. This is the highest it's ever been.
All right. Thank you, Ted Anderson. Okay, shifting gears for the balance of the hour. I'm going to be honest. I can barely think right now after reading this ATF letter. Where did my ATF letter go? I mean, I just want to run out of here and go shoot a special video and write a news article about this because this is so incredible. But that's coming up. We've also got Al Jourgensen, the founder and head of the mega successful rock band, techno, trance, whatever you want to call it, the granddaddies of so much of the modern music that's so popular today, of Ministry, is going to be joining us for a full hour coming up. We'll cover the waterfront with him. But going to London Telegraph writer, best-selling author, his new book's out, Watermelons, The Green Movement's True Colors. I would call them banker melons because they're communists that communize your wealth to give to the offshore banks, but it's always a Soros behind every great commie. But Polar Bear Gate, and I've got a report here. There's 3 other big breaking things that show total fraud and lies. I mean, basically they say, give all your money to Al Gore and kill yourself, and the earth will be saved. So Al Gore can have, you know, some more 20,000 square foot houses. But this Polar Bear Gate goes right to the White House, and I want to break it down. I mean, you know, the hoax that polar bears can't swim. Well, now it's that they can't swim long distances, and this has all been exposed as a calculated fraud. And James Dillingpole joining us. Break it down, please, sir.
From this point of view, there's a guy called Charles Monnet, who works for the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Regulation and Enforcement. And this guy has been in charge of a budget worth around $50 million. Now, how did he get to be put in charge of this budget of $50 million? Basically, in 2004, he came up with this amazing report which showed that these polar bears had drowned. Apparently, they'd been exhausted by swimming too far away from the landmass, and it was all somehow to do with man-made global warming. And this story was picked up by Al Gore. You remember how he used it in his propaganda film, An Inconvenient Truth. There was that graphic of a drowning polar bear, you know, again, killed because of man's greed and selfishness and global warming. And then it led to the polar bear being declared a threatened species. So this guy, Charles Monnet, was instrumental in having the polar bear declared the poster child of the global warming movement. You know, the polar bear was the symbol of everything we were doing wrong.
And even though in Arctic areas their numbers have doubled in the last 50 years, and they're known as vicious 1,200-pound rats that are just running around everywhere.
Well, Alex, it's true that in the last 50 years, the polar bear population has increased 5-fold.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it was about 5,000 50 years ago. It is now estimated to be around 25,000. Now, I do not call that an endangered species. I call that an infestation. I call that almost vermin. I call that a polar bear problem. But no way is the polar bear in any danger.
It's the same thing with bald eagles. They teach kids they're almost dead. You go on a cruise to Alaska, and I think the bald eagle's a neat bird, but they take you to the dump on tours where you watch them eating their favorite food, diapers, and they literally, you'll see 20 of them in a tree, 10 of them in that tree, eating all the fish. It's just bald eagles. I mean, growing up in Dallas, there's bald eagles all over the place. But no, there's no bald eagles. Give Al Gore all your money. Lord Rothschild needs it.
I think you know and I know, Alex, that the environmental movement has a pretty good record of playing fast and loose with the facts on endangered species.
Well, they're also constantly been caught over and over again in the U.S. dumping species that aren't endangered overall, but they say in an area are endangered, and they've been caught over and over again releasing animals and then finding them.
Well, you've got your Texas sand lizard, of course, haven't you, which has been causing trouble.
No, sir, we have a cave bug here used to steal hundreds of thousands of acres from private citizens, and then the green fascist then turned around years after, once they got the land, and sold it and own it personally. Yeah. They are absolute supreme rulers of this area.
There's the snail darter, there's the California Delta smelt, there was the spotted owl that stopped any forestation, any deforestation happening on the Pacific coast. animals are used by the environmental movement as a way of essentially in their war against the capitalist system. And this is exactly what happened in Alaska with this guy.
Well, it's a war against anyone's private property that isn't theirs. They're exempt from all the rules like General Electric. Now, let's talk about Polar Bear Gate because this goes right to the heart of them.
Well, I think what's interesting about this case is, number one, how is it that this guy is being prosecuted or investigated at least? You know, this guy works for a federal agency under the Obama administration. You would have thought that any guy working for a federal administration who comes up with a story showing that man is evil and we're endangering the environment, you would have thought he'd be given, at the very least, a Congressional Medal of Honor for his service to the cause of green lunacy. Because don't forget, the Obama administration is in it up to the hilt with eco-fascist values. You know, you've got people like Lisa Jackson at the EPA, you've got Carol Browner, you've got the eugenicist John Holdren, you've got all these crazy eco-loons in the Obama administration. So what is this guy doing being prosecuted? I think it can only mean that, or rather investigated, it can only mean that whatever this guy has done, it is really a quite serious case of fraud. This is not a guy whose innocent research has been corrupted and misreported and distorted by the media. This guy must be guilty of some kind of serious malfeasance. Now, I've been looking at the interview transcript of the Inspector General who's been investigating his case, and it's quite obvious, reading the transcript, that this guy, Charles Monnet, has been guilty of the most outrageous junk science. You know, he's taken the case of these bears, these polar bears, that he may or may not have seen drowning from an aeroplane. And, you know, 3 polar bears. And he's used these 3 polar bears. He's extrapolated from this that the polar bear is in grave danger. And remember here, we've got this guy getting a budget of £50 million, dollars to play with. Now, if you or I went and robbed a bank, robbed $50 million from a bank, I think we know what would happen to us. Yet, in the environmental movement, in the wonderful boondoggle of federal funding, it's perfectly okay to use junk science in order to create a scare story, and to effectively steal from the taxpayer $50 million to be wasted on further eco research. That's somehow okay? I don't think so.
Well, where does it go from here?
Well, I hope that this is a sign that, you know, we've seen the other evidence, the NASA report as well. I hope this is yet a further sign that the green Ponzi scheme is finally collapsing. You know, if this guy is being investigated, then it suggests to me that people are starting to run scared. You know, people are starting to think, hang on a second, we cannot get away with this scam any longer. We are going to be found out. So we may as well start prosecuting the bad guys now before we get blamed for it ourselves. So people are suddenly starting to cover their backs, doing their due diligence, you know, righting wrongs while they still can.
Now, there's a bunch of other scandals going on right now. NASA's come out with data showing that the Earth is off-gassing the heat and that the models are frauds. We already knew that. They've been caught fixing the models and setting them up over and over again. You've got the whole situation at the Hadron Collider where it showed that basically the other studies that it's the sun driving warming and the different particles that's sitting into the atmosphere forming cloud nuclei. That's come out. There's one other scandal. I mean, their entire thing is being routed, but they don't care. They're all over the news holding up penguins and polar bears saying they're all dying. And give your money to Al Gore and Lord Rothschild so they can have more jets and yachts and more royal trains or we're all dead.
Yeah. Although, you know, I sometimes wonder whether you know, every time we make a big deal about the new research showing that their theory is bunk, I think in a way we're playing their game because they want to persuade us that this is an issue that can be resolved through science. And actually, we know that has nothing to do with science. This is a political process.
This is a bunch of hardcore people that want your property and to run your life. We'll be right back.
That's what it's about. That's what.
Okay, going back to James Dillingpole of the London Telegraph. Finishing your point, James, you're saying don't even debate this on science because they've been proven to be total fraudsters, their internal emails. It's all, I mean, look, no carbon taxes on China building 3 coal power plants a week, and then the U.S. can't have 3 a year, and GE's moving everything to China. I mean, this is monopoly man stuff. I mean, they're just shutting us down because they've decided to move their operations to China. I mean, it's just robber baron behavior. And then Al Gore and all these other people are just disgusting scumbags.
Yeah. The science is a complete red herring, because the fact is that organizations like the IPCC have arranged it in such a way that real scientific debate isn't allowed to take place. In fact, what they want now is to create a situation where there is no null hypothesis. In other words, the burden of proof, this is what Kevin Trenberth says, the burden of truth should now be on us evil climate change deniers to prove that dangerous man-made climate change is not happening. Well, you can't prove a negative. So even though every day spectacular new evidence emerges that man-made global warming theory is just flawed and entirely, untrustworthy. No matter how new evidence comes through, you still have this great big machine, this political machine, this business machine of rent-seeking corporatists, the machine involving all these green NGOs like Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund. It's going to be very, very hard to derail this massive gravy train which is rolling on and on. There is so much money to be made out of it.
Yeah, it's a mafia system where you got to pay them a cut of everything, and then all their insiders are exempt. And then meanwhile, real environmental crises like all these genetic part human, part animal clones, oh, that's not an issue. Just Dillingpole, why are you so selfish? Why don't you just kill yourself and give your money to Al Gore to save the penguins?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Dillingpole, why are you so selfish? Jones, why are you so selfish? They always have to make it personal. It always has to be about people making deliberately wrong lifestyle choices.
Yeah, they've got the moral high ground as blood-sucking Nazi maggots.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like apparently you and I and your listeners, we secretly know the truth, but we lie about it because we're so selfish. I mean, this is just not the case at all. We just happen to have a handle on some kind of scientific reality, a reality which the warmists have abandoned a very, very long time ago.
Well, James, you know what they did at Copenhagen 2 years ago. They had a ruling that the sun does not heat the earth, and they said so, and everybody knows the sun doesn't heat the earth. You're a freak, man, okay? And I want you to apologize. I apologize to the listeners for that sick person who thinks the sun affects the earth. James Dillingpole, I want to have you back soon to talk about your new book. Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're scheduled to have Al Jourgensen, the founder of Ministry, super politically aware. I don't know even what you call it. I mean, the granddaddies of so much of the techno, trance, rock music, and talk about the New World Order, 9/11 inside job, all of it. He's coming up in the next segment. Look, I don't have words to describe this. When Bob Chapman's on, I'm going to get more into it. But I've got Paul Watson doing an article on this, and Aaron Dykes, and I'm pretty distracted right now, I'm going to be honest with you. Because this is such tyranny. This is so hardcore. The mind manipulation that's been done even on gun owners and the Second Amendment self-defense lobby is incredible, okay? A year ago, we found out that from Texas to California, they were quietly ordering by word of mouth, ATF coming into offices saying, if you sell 2 or more rifles, anything above a .22, what they call high power or semi-auto, deer rifles, anything. And by the way, gun buyers, when you finally get into a gun shop, I tend to buy more than one. In fact, that's why I don't get near gun shops. But you buy a couple guns. You already go through the FBI instant check. They already know what's going on, how many guns. You're checked that you're not a felon.